Now, in tonight's debate, I'm going to defend two basic contentions. First, that there's no good argument that atheism is true.
Are there good reasons?
And secondly, there are good arguments that atheism is true.
Are there, do you think?
Now, most carefully, the circumscribed limits of those contentions. We're not here tonight to debate the social impact of religion or Testament ethics.
Hey everybody, Black Swan here. I just wanted to give a quick little intro on this video. I noticed as I was editing it, there were certain places where I used language that I think was more harsh, more demeaning than I really wanted it to be. I used phrases like crazy ideas or absurd ideas, things like that. I think in retrospect, I probably would have used more neutral language, get the idea across, but I think there are more charitable ways to have phrased it. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Obviously, I'm not going to re-record the whole thing. The intent of what I wanted is in there, and just know going forward I'm going to work at using better language. So hopefully you enjoy the rest of this video, and we'll see you at the end.
So you brought up that he changed his premise from its usual setup by adding the word transcendent.
Right. So his normal appeal here would be everything that begins to exist has a cause. It's just sort of a broad statement. In this argument, he says if the universe began to exist, it had a transcendent cause. So he tries to dodge the uncaused cause right in the premise. He tries to dodge a self-causing or self-actualizing universe in his initial premise.
Yeah, but it also, he does so in a way that I think is kind of clever, right? And he's like, okay, it has to be God, is basically what that is supposed to mean.
Right. Yes, there's the implication in there that which transcends the universe is God.
Yeah, and it's really clever because he again uses this thing of muddling language to make his premise seem really reasonable. Yeah, of course things have a cause, but of course that cause is God? I don't know. Right. And if you put the word God in there, people might be like, I don't know about that. But if you just say it's transcendent,
right,
it's a little reasonable, right?
Yes, it looks much more reasonable because things just don't cause themselves. So it has to be outside of the thing that's being caused. And of course, that's God, but we're not going to say God here. This is what the intelligent design community has done. Because they got told that they couldn't legally teach creationism in schools. So they just excised the word God out and they just put a creator in there. And it's well, that's not God. It's just something caused it.
And that's one reason to get clever about things like that. I wish they were clever about other things, but
yeah, like reading science books.
Well, not that, but this there's logic that these people have. There's real value these people produce to communities. It's just wasted on doing crap like that.
Yes,
which is actually a section in the debate.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about these things, and I poo-poo a lot of things, but the people Dr. Craig is not a stupid man at all. He's very smart. I think he's bound up in his own ideologies. I think that limits what he can do, but he's not he's not a stupid guy. He's very intelligent.
Yeah, I don't care why he's doing this, right? For me, it's a good chance for people to learn, right? And that's what Carol took it as an opportunity as. It gave him a platform to say, hey, this is why I don't believe the things Craig does.
Yeah.
Because he knows he's not going to convince Craig. Because, there's a good chance Craig isn't even doing this because he believes it. It's a job. I don't fault people for working.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it's a good gig. It's honest money, right?
I've debated positions I don't believe in, and that advocated for more consequentially worse positions than he does. It
is so funny that you bring that up. So one of the debate sets that I'm not using in my series is where Dr. Craig debated Lawrence Krauss. And when they first went into these debates, they're entertaining to watch. Well, entertaining is the wrong word. I was rewatching one of them recently. Lawrence Krauss's first 15 minutes opening was almost entirely an ad hominem against Dr. Craig. And Dr. Craig's first opening was 15 minutes of an appeal to emotion. They're very lively and spirited if you want to watch them. But when they first did their first couple of debates together, Krauss found it inconceivable that somebody could actually believe what Craig believes that he says that he believes. So as Dr. Craig was giving his opening talk, Lawrence Krauss had like a loud buzzer by his side, and every time Craig said something that was factually wrong, he hit the buzzer, like a like that. Fortunately, he stopped doing that because it's really disrespectful. I mean, frankly, I think Krauss is a bit of a jackass, but it's that same idea that he didn't think that Craig actually believed what he was saying. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know.
Doesn't matter to me. I'm here to criticize the ideas, not the dude. Like,
sounds good. Let's move on to premise 2. I have far less notes about premise 2. So, right. Going back to Craig's preamble and the start of all this, and again, a fundamental problem is we just don't know. And Carroll says this explicitly. In fact, Guth said it explicitly in the clip that he had there.
Now, you might think that, there's a theorem by Alan Guth and Arvin Bourdet and Alex Vlenkin that says the universe had a beginning. I've explained to you why that's not true, but in case you don't trust me, I happen to have Alan Guth right here, one of the authors of the Bourdet-Guth-Vlenkin theorem. Alan, what do you say? He says, I don't know whether the universe had a beginning. I suspect the universe didn't have a beginning. It's very likely eternal, but nobody knows. Now, how in the world can the author of the Bourdet-Guth-Vlenkin theorem say the universe is probably eternal for the reasons I've already told you? The theorem is only about classical descriptions of the universe, not about the universe itself.
Guth said, I think the universe is eternal, but we just don't know. And I don't see, this is where I feel the standard of the burden of proof on that premise is really important, because it's just an open question. Craig repeatedly says it's more probable that the universe began to exist, but we don't know that the universe began to exist. So I don't see how this stands as a sound argument when one of the premises is something that we just don't know and can't know right now.
So that's actually part of the reason why his framework is super important, though. If we're going to go back to that for a second.
Yeah.
Remember, Craig is just trying to convince you it's more likely.
Yes.
That's the only goal he set.
Yes, he repeatedly uses that more probable, more likely phrasing throughout the debate. And that's a pretty low bar.
It's a low bar, right? But think about the type of the audience he might be trying to bring in by making this type of argument, right? This clearly isn't appealing to theists out there. This is saying to people who maybe are agnostic or something, perhaps.
Right.
That, maybe you should give some credence to my belief system.
Right. Maybe it's sensible. Yeah. I mean, not that I think there's anybody that's ever converted to Christianity because of a logical argument, but you never know.
That's fair, yeah.
One of the other critiques I have about the second premise, the concept of begins to exist is sort of ill-defined, I think. What exactly does he mean by begins to exist? Is he talking about the beginning of the expansion? Is he talking about the singularity coming into existence in the first place? Because we don't know if the singularity... We don't even know if the singularity is a thing or not, actually. That's a hypothesized entity, but we don't know for sure that that was actually a real thing. So what exactly are you saying when you say it begins to exist? Because I think it's pretty settled science that there was a time where the universe was compressed into an infinitely small spot and began to rapidly expand. That's not controversial, but does that really mean begins to exist there?
Right. There's actually even a moment worth pointing out in the debate where he conflates the meaning of beginning where he starts saying that the beginning of like this period of the universe we are in, where we're like heading towards this like thermal equilibrium.
Right.
He uses that as meaning the beginning of something, and like Carroll calls him out. He's like, no, that's like, you know, a thermal beginning to the universe, not like the beginning to the
Right.
universe.
Is
That's
that-
a moment of beginning within the middle of my model.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that was Carroll's model that he was going back to, which even he says there's holes in this model. We just, because we don't have a solid model yet.
Yeah, but that model definitely didn't have a beginning as like the,
No.
you know, what we would call a beginning. It stretches infinitely.
It stretches infinitely in either direction. Yeah.
But there is a middle point, which is really interesting.
There's
an exact middle to his infinite space.
Right, which is sort of our starting point. This is where the infinities get really confusing.
Yeah, I've like taken Calc 2, so I know like a bit about like why that works out, but like I'm not qualified to talk about it at length.
Yeah. And this is another thing, talking about the infinities that Craig brings up. He talks about the metaphysical or logical impossibility of having an actually infinite set of something. And one of the things that he brings up is he says it's impossible to have an infinite series of events because we would never get to where we are now or whatever. But one of the things, going back to the temporal language, what do you mean a series of events? Because what does that mean if we don't have time? How can you, because series of something is an inherently temporal concept. First this, then that. That is what a series is, and on and on and on. So sure, maybe we can have an infinite series of things within our space-time framework, but apart from our space-time framework, why not? Does a series even make any sense in that context?
Right, and like this is a bit of like my mathematics that kind of works here. But like we don't use series, we use sets, because sets like don't have any like weird language bindings to them. You know, they're just like a set means it's a thing of like all these things and they're unique. And
Right. So like the set of all integers.
yes, a
mathematically.
set of all integers is an infinite set. And that just works in math, and like we accept that.
Right. And that's where you run into these sort of weird, and I don't know how math deals with this, but philosophical ideas is like, what is infinity minus infinity? It's infinity. Like imagine if you have the set of all integers and you subtract from that all positive integers. You
Well, now
still
you
have
have
an
a new
infinite
infinite
set
set.
of, what's that?
Then you just have a new infinite set, which is
Right.
like really weird to wrap our heads around, but like
It
it's
really
useful
is.
for scientists.
Right. And this is why he's saying like infinite sets are impossible. But again, we're
But they
talking
are.
about our space-time framework. And do we know anything about what's not in our space-time framework? No, we don't. I say we don't. So now I want to move on. Goodness, there's so many notes.
Yeah, right?
Now I would like to move on to Craig's second set of premises. This is not formally a part of the Kalam, but it's something Craig almost always brings to the Kalam. Now, I'm going to show a different clip here. The clip I'm going to use is from his debate with Peter Atkins, his second debate with Atkins, because he doesn't bring these up in the debate with Carroll. I still think that Carroll's debate is the best one to use for the Kalam because they go so deep into the science, and Craig relies on that. But let's discuss this second set, and I will play it now.
Now, from the very nature of the case, this cause must be an uncaused, changeless, timeless, and immaterial being which created the universe. It must be uncaused because we've seen there cannot be an infinite regress of causes. It must be timeless and therefore changeless, at least without the universe, because it created time. Because it also created space, it must transcend space as well, and therefore be immaterial, not physical. Now, there are only two possible candidates that could fit such a description. Either an abstract object like a number, or else an unembodied mind or consciousness. But abstract objects don't stand in causal relations. The number 7, for example, can't cause anything. And therefore it follows logically that the transcendent cause of the universe is an unembodied mind. And thus we are brought not merely to a first uncaused cause of the universe, but to its personal creator.
So the reason I wanted to bring up the second set of premises is one of the fundamental problems, again, with the Kalam is it doesn't get you to God or a God. It certainly doesn't get you to the Christian God. All it gets you to, if you accept it as a sound argument, the universe has a cause. And that's it. And Craig tacks on to this all of this metaphysical baggage about spaceless entities, timeless entities, changeless entities. How can something be changeless and then decide to do something? Like, there was an infinite no time where we didn't exist and then God decided to make us? How is that not a change? I mean, I think it's just silly that he tacks on all this metaphysical baggage onto it and tries to say, see, that's what we mean by God, so it must be God. And he's got these ridiculous terms like timelessness. What does timelessness even mean?
It's hard to define, but like there's actually, I don't think a lot of, like you don't even need to look at all this extra baggage to see like the problem in this logic, which is like what you pointed out. He tries to get to a specific place. And again, he uses that if and only if logic, right? Like this is a classic false dichotomy. Because like really what he gets you to at is like, yeah, this like infinite set of possible causes for existence. But you can't pick out any particular thing from that set.
Right.
You just know it's there.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And he's also, I think he's also arguing backwards from his ideology as well. Yeah.
It's like classic, like confirmation bias type of thing.
Right.
It's like, oh, how can I explain my already existent worldview? And that's like why I'm not so critical of Carol's position in this, because his position is, how can I explain this, like the things that I see?
Right. And we've got Craig arguing from the conclusion towards the evidence and Carol arguing from the evidence towards the conclusion.
Right. And so that's why, like, when I say things like, well, maybe we just like don't have the model yet. And like I say, like, yeah, it could be anything. Like, and that's just not a problem for Carol's position because his position admits it.
Right. That we just don't have the model yet. And frankly, I don't know is an uncomfortable place to be a lot of times. As a species, we don't like that. Which is why we tend to try and stuff things in there, which, as much as Craig tries to deny it, this is a gigantic God of the gaps argument.
Right. I was actually a little bit surprised that Craig didn't try and throw that type of argument back at Carol, because that's something I've seen some people do, saying like, yeah, you say I'm just using gods of the gaps to explain things I don't know, but you're just like doing the same thing, being like, yeah, the scientific method will figure it out eventually. We don't know, but that's fine.
Yep. I've heard science of the gaps more than once.
But like, yeah, the problem is they work from the opposite directions, and that's why science of the gaps is bullshit.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, because they work in different ways. Let's move on now to some summary thoughts. I just wanted to, like, quick thoughts, like a broad overview of the debate itself. And frankly, I think we come to this in different directions, but I think Craig lost this debate handily. And for me, it was because he was arguing outside of his realm of expertise, outside of his area of expertise. Craig is a philosopher and a theologian. He is not a physicist, but he is trying to use physics to support his arguments. Carol's a physicist, and frankly, I think he just mopped the floor with him when it came to the physics.
Yeah, so that is certainly the case. For me, I got to same conclusion. I think, Carol was very convincing in this debate, even taking one of his speeches to say, I've already won this debate. I have nothing else to say against the points of Craig. Here's, where Craig can go because he's so wrong that I have to give him, not have to, but I want to give him direction and give people hope because I don't want to shit on Craig.
Yep.
And that like was a real big moment for me. But actually the biggest moment for me, I've like, okay, this debate's over, is I did what I call a pencil down moment. You know, I like was watching the debate and I take notes, right? I'm like following all the lines of argument. I have a flow chart. And then Craig goes up to talk in his rebuttal. And he just doesn't say anything I feel I should write down.
Yep.
And I've been there. I've been in those moments. He just reiterated all his arguments because he wasn't prepared.
That is so funny because I have actually read Dr. Carroll's blog post, and he says that almost verbatim. He says it was so frustrating because I would answer Craig's points, and then instead of dealing with my responses, he would just go back up and reiterate what he said before.
Yeah, and I know why that happens. I've been in debates where that's happened to me. I was over my head. People were just more prepared in the debate, and they came with arguments that countered mine, and I didn't have a retort. And so all I could do was hope to repeat my arguments and be like, man, maybe my audience won't understand that I'm just repeating my arguments because there's a lot of jargon. You'll notice he uses a lot of jargon.
Oh, yes.
And he kind of sounds intelligent, but then Carroll just like does it perfectly. He says, yeah, he didn't actually answer any of my points. He repeated it, and he doesn't engage. He doesn't give him the audience the perception that Craig said anything worthwhile because he didn't.
Right, yeah. This was, I mean, this is definitely a divisive debate in the atheist-theist community. Basically, everybody on each side claims that their guy won, which is, I guess, what you'd expect. Well, I guess what you would expect, but I honestly don't do that myself. I mean, I look at that Zindler debate, and Craig just mopped the floor with Zindler. It was a bloodbath. And many of Craig's debates are that way. Although I'm hoping we can find a spot to do his debate against Christopher Hitchens, because that is just glorious. That is a brilliant piece of work. But yeah, I think Craig was just completely out of his element, completely unprepared, and his usual rhetoric didn't work on Sean Carroll.
Right, and this is why I think it's a good point to mention framework again, right?
Yes.
Like, did these debaters meet their goals? Did I feel that, you know, the science proved that God is statistically more probable? And the answer was just no, right? Like, you know, we mentioned that's a pretty low bar.
Right.
And even granted that, I still don't think he met it. And that honestly just has to do with what I would feel amounts to preparation, right? Like, looking in that, it just looks like he wasn't prepared for Carroll to answer everything that he did. Not only that, because like Carroll did a really good job in like making sure he wasn't prepared by arguing outside of like this like trap.
Right.
You know, he really just said like, hey, here's my argument, and now I'm going to talk about my second premise for like 30 minutes, and here's my whole first.
Right.
And yeah, he just didn't have arguments prepared to talk about his first premise, right? And like we talked a lot about why his first premise is like, it just doesn't work.
I know.
So that's just why it doesn't get there. That's why there's no probability for me.
Right.
He has no argument.
Yeah, it's that point he brings up, and he says, oh, this is pretty much, I'll take this as self-evident, like everybody does. And both we and Carroll talked about it a lot. There's a lot to talk about there. I think he was probably, I bet, again, you can only speculate so much about what's going on inside someone's head. I will bet the reason he did that is because he wanted to focus on the second premise, because that's where he brings the science in. And he wanted to keep the debate focused on that because he was debating against a physicist. So I think he didn't expect that first premise to be challenged. I'll bet he expected Carroll to stay completely focused on the second premise.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But that's just not how a debate works. If you give an argument that has a logical structure, it's up for criticism.
Yes.
Like, even if you're not prepared for it, you should have been, dude. Like, sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe if you had more time to prepare your arguments, right, maybe Craig could come and try and convince me of his position a bit better. But in this debate, he didn't.
Yeah, I don't think Craig needs any more time to prepare his arguments. He's been doing this since his doctoral days. So his doctoral dissertation was on the Kalam.
Yeah, that's fair. But there's also like considerations like speech time and stuff, right? Like
Right.
that's always the biggest kicker. In this
Yeah.
case, it actually wasn't a problem, where with Zimler it was. That's like why Zimler lost, is to debate time.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
But here, Craig just had nothing to say, so it was the exact opposite.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about exhausted it for the Kalam. We will wrap this up here. The next video or set of videos I'm going to do, are you going to join me for another one?
Oh yeah, I love this. I love watching
Awesome.
these debates.
So the next one we're going to do is going to be on the teleological argument.
Oh, intelligent design bullshit, right?
Essentially, it's intelligent design. Yeah. It's the idea that the argument that the universe exists because it looks designed, therefore there must be a designer, is essentially the teleological argument. But we will get into that. This is going to be released in several pieces, at least 2, I think actually probably 3 videos. So this will come out a chunk at a time. I want to keep my videos down to like 30 minutes. I will have already included a clip in the first video telling people that. But now we're at the end of the 3rd or 4th video. So here we are. So after this, we're going to do the teleological and we'll go through the moral argument. That might be a good one for Christopher Hitchens. And then the argument from the resurrection. That should be fun. And then the appeal to the emotion that he likes to tack on to the end of everything. Thank you so much, Vinny, for joining me. It was awesome to have you.
Yeah, it was nice being here. Nice seeing you again.
Yeah, nice seeing you too, man. COVID. What the hell, right?
COVID.
COVID days. Thank
So
all
don't
of you
like
people.
COVID gang signs.
Yeah,
COVID
the COVID gang sign. If that becomes a thing, I'm claiming it. Thank you all for sticking with us through all of these videos. With all of them, if you like them, thumbs up. If you don't like them, thumbs down. That's fine. I won't judge. If you think we've misrepresented anything in this video, please feel free to leave comments. If you think we're wrong about anything, please feel free to leave comments. If you think we're right, heap on the praise. We'll take it. We don't care. That's good.
Yeah, I take all the compliments I can get.
Yeah.
And I take all the criticism I can get, too. Like, seriously, if you have some... If I did something wrong, let me know. I'll read
Yeah, please do. This would be great.
We're open to learning.
Maybe I can actually make you a moderator on the channel or something like that. That would be cool.
I'm down to moderate, yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much. As always, be kind to one another and stay safe out there. And I'll see you all next time.